them in the chat and I can help you out. Okay, except the first thing I said was that I'm going to put some links in the chat, and then I didn't do that. So I'm going to start with that. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Samantha Hooker. I'll be the moderator for today's Eval Cafe. The Cafe is a long-standing speaker series hosted by the Evaluation Center at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The goal of the series is to encourage a deeper dive into all things evaluation. I've added links to join the Evaluation Cafe email list, as well as the link so that you can view the rest of our upcoming spring schedule in the chat. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for future presentations. Before we begin, we do like to take a moment to acknowledge the history of the land we're on. Western Michigan University is located on the ancestral lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, which was historically occupied by the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and we honor their stewardship and connection to the land. Today, we're excited to be joined by Cherie Avent, an assistant professor at the University of Illinois. Her work focuses on issues related to social justice and evaluation, communication, and STEM education and evaluation. She's evaluated multiple education programs and projects funded by organizations such as the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Education. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can go ahead and enter them in the chat at any time. You can also use the reaction button to raise your hand. And with that, I'll hand it over to our presenter.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Samantha, so much for the introduction. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. As Samantha said, my name is Cherie Avent, and I am faculty at the University of Illinois. And so today, we'll be talking some about components of mixed methods. And so I'm going to get us started. Let me just share my screen to get us going here. And I've titled the presentation, Telling the Story, Mixed Methods, Integration, and Reporting. And so how I would like to use our time today is to discuss a few things. One, just make sure we're all on the same page about what are some key components of mixed methods. And so I like to say I'm going to define mixed methods or talk about some core principles of mixed methods. Then talk some about integration and joint displays, which are a key part of mixed methods. And then talk to you all about what are some integration approaches for when conducting a mixed method study. And then lastly, diving a little bit into what are some alternative ways of reporting mixed methods results, specifically some arts-based approaches for our work. And so as Samantha said, if you do have questions, please feel free to add them in the chat or to signal as we are going along today. So I want to begin by defining mixed methods because I think, the field of mixed methods is still considered a very young field. Its formalization between the 1960s and 1970s as a result of, particularly here in the United States, came about as a result of some discontentment that was happening with government programs, how they were being reported, and what we were learning. And so we saw a number actually of evaluation scholars really starting out to build the mixed methods field, scholars such as Dr. Jennifer Green. And so in defining mixed methods, I highlight three kind of key aspects that I think are important. The first is mixed methods involves the collecting, analyzing, and integrating findings, both from quantitative and qualitative data in a single study. That we are collecting and analyzing our qualitative and quantitative data, oftentimes simultaneously, but separately, or it is happening sequentially. And I will explain a little bit more about that when we talk about our integration. Also key in this statement is the integration piece. So often integration is underutilized, but it is central to mixed methods in helping us understand new insights or building meta inferences that come about when we combine both our qualitative and our quantitative components. Second is utilizing a specific research design. So in mixed methods research, there tend to be some key research designs that researchers and evaluators draw upon. Those being a convergent or concurrent mixed methods design, a nested design, an exploratory design, or an explanatory design. And so when doing a mixed methods research project or a mixed methods evaluation, it is always important to specify what is your design type. And then a third component of mixed methods, when we're thinking about how we define it, is so often mixed methods researchers and evaluators are working within a paradigm being a worldview that forms a worldview that is highlighting kind of the perspective in which you do your work, and or the use of a theoretical framework that is really guiding the umbrella of the entire study. So for instance, one paradigm might be pragmatism that a researcher or evaluator might operate from. And pragmatism, at its simplest description, is that we are seeking the best methods to answer the research questions. A theory or theoretical framework that one might draw from could be feminist theory, critical race theory. And so I highlight that because generally when we see published works around mixed methods research or mixed methods evaluation, there is a theory or a paradigm that is undergirding the work. And so I think it is important that we are always being explicit about what that paradigm and or theory is. And for some researchers and evaluators, their work includes both a paradigm and a theory. What you will notice is that sometimes when you see definitions of mixed methods, they may highlight different values that researchers are using. So for instance, Dr. Donna Mertens, when she describes her definition of mixed methods, she includes, the collection and analysis of qualitative and quantitative methods. But what she also highlights is that the use of mixed methods for addressing and attending to issues of human rights, of oppression and things of that nature. And so I just want to highlight this. There are those who also think that there is a difference between multi-methods and mixed methods. I won't get into that debate, but do know that there are those who see them as being distinctly different. All right, so I want to move us into talking about mixed methods integration. I use this image to help us begin thinking about what does it mean to combine these two pieces of our qualitative and quantitative together. And so if we wanted to define integration, one way we can define it is thinking about it as an intentional process where you, the researcher or evaluator, are bringing together your qualitative and your quantitative components in the study. And I say that it's intentional because it does require some planning and some thinking about design and, being purposeful in the work. And so integration is another way of saying, how are we going to interconnect these two pieces so that they become interdependent upon one another? Many ask, and my students always ask, well, why do we have to do integration in a mixed method study? And one of the reasons is we want to be able to create a picture where we have greater understanding or better understanding of what's happening with these two combined versus if they were their separate parts. Otherwise, you might be able to get away with just doing a qualitative study or just doing a quantitative study, right? So bringing them together through this integration. Another reason we do integration is to know how can our qualitative data help us assess the validity of our quantitative findings, or it might be thinking about how can our quantitative data help us generate a qualitative sample, or how can our qualitative data help us explain something that we're seeing in our quantitative findings. So that is the reason for having integration in a mixed method study and being intentional about bringing these two together for understanding what is happening between the two. So many scholars indicate that integration can happen at multiple levels. They can say it happens at the study design level, at the methods level, and at the interpretation and reporting level. Today, I'm going to focus on the methods level, but I'll just highlight a little bit about the other two. So at the study design level, it is identifying what is your design type. Are you doing an explanatory design, an exploratory design, a convergent design, even a nested design, right? Your explanatory and your exploratory designs are considered sequential designs, so they build on one another. Your convergent design being where you are looking to merge both your qualitative and quantitative results to compare them. At the methods level, which we'll be talking about today and thinking about what are some different approaches that one might be able to use, it is linking your data collection and analysis in different ways. And so we're going to talk about these ways through a connecting approach, a building approach, and a merging approach. And then your interpretation and reporting of integration is what's the narrative that you are going to share out through your integration at the methods level. And so if we think about in our reports, is it having a section on qualitative findings, have a section on qualitative findings, and then having an integration section where you highlight what are the meta inferences that have come about as a result of bringing these two together. But again, today I am going to focus on integration at the methods level. And before we move in talking about these, I do want to highlight something that I think is really important that helps us with integration, and that is the use of joint displays. Joint displays are a visual way for us to see across our data, or it helps us to think about how we're going to build out different components of this. So Gutterman defines a joint display as a visual means to draw out new insights beyond information gained from the separate quantitative and qualitative results. So I like to think about it at its simplest form is how can we maybe create a table that helps us see between these two pieces, and what are the specific domains or the specific concepts that we're looking at for each of these. And so I thought one of the best ways to kind of learn a little bit more about joint displays is I will show you a short video clip by Dr. Michael Fetterman as he talks about building a joint display. So if you just give me one moment here. Hold on, technology.
Cherie, this is Lori in the Avent Cafe room. We can't hear the audio.
Now, what were
Okay.
key
Hold on
stakeholders
one.
Do you want to say?
kind of trial called an
Oh,
adaptive
there we go. Thank you.
trial for looking at methods joint display is a table or a figure that represents with some kind of structural features, both the qualitative or the quantitative data collection. And in cases that can be the data collection procedures, or it could actually be the findings in a juxtaposed representation. So when we say juxtaposed, we mean that it's basically side by side, that the qualitative and the quantitative information are there together in a joint display. So let's look at what is actually a joint display. And I'm just briefly going to tell you about where the joint display that you're going to see next is coming from. It's from a study called the Adapted study that used a joint display. And we were looking to find out what were key stakeholder perspectives about using a unique kind of trial called an adaptive clinical trial for looking at individuals who had brain injury emergencies in emergency rooms. And so the data collection involved survey and many focus group interviews where the surveys collected both scaled data as well as qualitative data. And then for the integration aspect, which is a piece many people are very interested in, we used a joint display. So we merged in the joint display participant attitudes using the visual analog scales and qualitative interview data, as well as free text comments that were from the survey. So we could now look at that joint display. I'm going to orient you. I'm sorry. This is actually what this instrument looked at. So it had scales like this. It was online, and you could move a bar. This is called a visual analog scale. We gave people anchors for definitely, not to, definitely, and then we posed a question to them. So they had a question, and then they used the scale. And then there was a open-ended question about what was the rationale for their response. Thank you. So now we can go to the next slide. So this is a lot to look at and take in. I'm going to go through this slowly. So this is a joint display labeled with what the different components in a joint display are. So if we start on the extreme left, we see in the first blue box on the left, color coding by group access across the quantitative and qualitative data. So in other words, there's green from the attitudinal findings, and those in that first box match to quotes from specific groups. So the green match with consultant biostatistician group, the brown matched with clinicians, the purple matched with other key stakeholders, and blue matched with academic statisticians. Now at the top, we see quantitative findings presented using box plots. So in this particular joint display, we used a figure to present the attitudinal findings. As we'll see in a couple other iterations, you could also just use the specific numbers. In this case, we used these box plots. Now moving to the right a little bit, we see qualitative findings, which are presented as quotes, and that area is labeled as illustrative quotes. And then we have those four different groups matching to each of those lines from the attitudinal findings. And then in the last column, we have the meta inferences. So meta inferences is language used by mixed methods researchers to say, what is your interpretation in consideration of both types of data together? So when we look at what did the quantitative findings show, what did the qualitative findings show, what is our new interpretation? What are the meta inferences that we can draw from that? This particular joint display also has, if you look at the bottom there, the box at the very bottom, the blue box, an indication of the source of the qualitative data. And so because there were both many focus groups and there were comments from the survey, you can see in the brown where that came from many focus group, and you can see in the very bottom in the bluish color that was from the survey. So this is again a cutting edge presentation of results. So let's.
Okay, so I want to just pause here and kind of go back through what we're seeing as it relates to a joint display and how that is related to integration as we think about mixed methods. And so we see here visually in one space kind of the bringing together on a specific concept within the study, attitudinal findings. And what we have is our quantitative finding results, which in this study that Dr. Fetterman is talking about, we have some box plots. And then in relation to these attitudinal findings are qualitative findings, which are presented via quotes that correspond to the different box plot groupings. And then really important as we think about integration or mixed methods integration is the meta inferences, right? So what do we learn now as a result of bringing our quantitative data together with our qualitative together and this new insight that is gained as a result of that? And so I point this out. So as we begin talking about some of these different mixed methods integration approaches, knowing that a joint display is key to helping us understand what the new insight is that has been gained. And I'll show you some examples of other joint displays that researchers have done to help them in their work as it relates to mixed methods. Let me go back to our slides here. See a couple. I just want to keep eye on the chat. Yes, I can share the link to this video at the end. That is not a problem. Okay, so some approaches to mixed methods integration, and this approaches are happening at that methods level, and they are based on mixed methods design types. And so what I'll do first is just kind of overview the different design types, and then we'll talk more about the various mixed methods approaches here. So I am going to be talking about 3 mixed methods design types as it relates to integration. And so I just want to highlight those design types. They are an explanatory design type, an exploratory design type, and a concurrent, also known as a convergent design type. Those 2 are used interchangeably depending upon where you are, but know that concurrent and convergent are talking about the same mixed methods design type. Your explanatory and exploratory design types are sequential, which means one builds on the other. So your explanatory design type often begins with your quantitative component, where you are analyzing your quantitative, you are collecting your quantitative data, analyzing it, and then you're going to look through it to see what additional data what additional areas within that quantitative results do you want to explore further, and how can it inform your qualitative data collection and analysis. With your exploratory design type, we are beginning with our qualitative component. We then move from the qualitative component and allow the themes or the codes from that qualitative piece to build or inform what we're going to do in the quantitative piece. And then we oftentimes are going to pilot test that quantitative component, then fully administer, and then do some interpretation. And then with your convergent or concurrent design, it is within the same time period, you are collecting and analyzing your qualitative and your quantitative results, but doing them separately. And then you're going to bring them together to look across to see what can be learned. Any questions here so far? Okay. So the first approach that we have for mixed methods integration is what many call the connecting approach to mixed methods. The purpose of the connecting approach for integration is you want to connect the qualitative component with the quantitative piece to help explain what you're seeing in your quantitative results. So here, this is why we start with the quantitative data collection, and then we're going to use that qualitative to help explain some things that we see happening. And so Cresswell and Plano-Clark offer some steps and how one might do this connecting approach, right? So they offer 5 steps. The first is gather and analyze your quantitative data. Then as you are conducting your analysis, looking through that analysis to see, where might you want to dig more deeply into that component, and then identifying a purposeful sample within that quantitative piece that can help best explain it. So let's say you have created a survey and you've done some statistical analysis on it, and you see maybe some group of outliers that you want to know a little bit more about. And you're going to say, I'm going to interview these individuals to help me explain a little bit more about what's going on. And so you are going to talk with those individuals, collect qualitative data, let's say through interviews or maybe a focus group, and then collecting and analyzing that qualitative data. And then step 4 is where we see using the joint display to represent your quantitative and your qualitative results, where ultimately the interpretation that comes from this is what's the value added of the quantitative results through the qualitative explanation. Okay. And so one of the ways I think about how might this be represented in a joint display to get to those meta inferences, which are, these new insights that one has been gained, maybe through a table. So I want to show an example from an article that is from McCrudden and McTeague, who were doing an explanatory study on belief bias on climate change with high school students. And so in looking at this table for integration and using a joint display, here's what they did. We see where we have their quantitative findings here, and they group them by those with more objective views and less subjective views. Then they provided a summary just to kind of help themselves with understanding what was happening. And then, here's, we have their quantitative, but then we move over and here's some exemplar quotes that they felt spoke directly to each of these various groups that are their qualitative results in this. And then they provided a summary again of that quote. And then what we see at the end here is the meta inference, right? So what is it that they are now learning as a result of pulling these two pieces together and reporting out this meta inference for audiences to know? And so here's one way in which using a connected approach in an explanatory design using a joint display might help us see how we are using both our qualitative and our quantitative pieces, and that they are really now speaking to one another to provide more valuable insight about what was happening with the quantitative work. A second integration approach is called the building approach, which we often see with the exploratory design type. As I explained, the exploratory design is you are first collecting and analyzing your qualitative data, and then the findings are going to inform the quantitative data collection and analysis. And so the intent of this building approach is thinking about how your qualitative data analysis is going to help you build your quantitative component that you will then use within that second portion or the second phase of your study. Excuse me. And so Cresswell and Plano Clark explained the building approach, through 6 steps. As I said, when you're doing an explanatory design or using the building approach, again, you're starting with the qualitative data for themes and codes. As a result of these themes and codes, then it's determining what quantitative feature might I want to design, or maybe that's already out there and has been validated that you want to use that is going to help you build upon that qualitative piece. And so it is thinking about how can I join my qualitative themes with specific components of that quantitative feature that you're going to use, and I'll show what that looks like in just a minute. And so then here it's using your joint display to help you connect these pieces. So I talk with my students about thinking about the joint display for the building approach as linking my qualitative themes with, if I'm using a survey for my quantitative component, linking that with my questions on my survey that are helping me get at a specific theme or construct from my qualitative piece. After I've done that and using the joint display to show those links and connections, then pilot testing my quantitative instrument, fully administering it to my full sample or full population from the quantitative perspective, and then interpreting how the quantitative results support our understanding, the quality and the cultural specificity of that developed feature there. And so I'm going to show an example of a joint display that was used to help in this building approach from an exploratory design type. here. And so this is from a study that was done with African American males on non-spousal family support. And so we will see on this far column, what were some of the sub-themes that came out in their interviews that they did with these African American males. And so we see, the men reported that family members help with frequency. They reported that they communicated with family members often, that they reported their family members appear interested in their mental health and well-being. And so then they used a national survey on American life. And so what we see in this column here is where they're beginning to connect which of the questions are going to help them get at these sub-themes, again, to ensure theme and construct connection to scale questions. After they actually completed their study, we see their p-values here. And then what was their mixed methods interpretation? And one of the things I actually really like about this joint display is not only are they providing the interpretation, but they are providing kind of like how their interpretation was drawn in between the connection between the qualitative and quantitative results. So as it relates to help, and helping, they found that, not only is it socially and culturally relevant, which came out in their qualitative results, but it also found to be statistically significant for older church-going African American men in the study, to seek help and to talk about how often they get help from family members. And so here's another example of what a joint display might look like based upon the integration approach that is being used here. And then our last integration approach, which we see with the convergent or the concurrent design, is a merging approach, right? And so with our concurrent or convergent design, if you recall, I talked about we are doing it, collecting both our qualitative and our quantitative and our qualitative data within a similar time frame, and then we're looking to merge them to make some comparisons. And so when thinking about what this might look like, Cresswell and Plano Clark say, okay, we are analyzing our qualitative and quantitative data. Then looking between both of that, both portions of that analysis to see, are there any common concepts that are coming across in those findings? So maybe you are working on a study related to students in STEM, and you, in your, let's say, interviews, there are themes that come up around STEM identity, and you also have that as an element within your quantitative component. And so then it may be building out a joint display where you are going to put the construct of science identity in your joint display, and then represent that through your quantitative results, through your qualitative results, and then what is the meta inference across. And so in the merging approach, when we are thinking about how is integration helping us understand the new information learned, it's when looking across our findings, both in the quantitative and qualitative components, are they confirming each other? Is there disconfirming, or might we see places of expansion, right? And by expansion, it is there are multiple things happening and that we're learning something new in addition to. And so then we interpret in these findings based upon how the merged data increases our understanding of the phenomena. So I want to pause here for a moment to see if there are any questions.
And if you do have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself, put it in the chat, or use that reaction button to raise your hand, whatever works best for you.
So we move now to, okay, what are some ways that we can begin reporting our mixed method study, right? You've conducted the study, you've done your analysis and interpretation, and it's time, in my opinion, it's time to go back to the communities, the partners that you've been working with, to think about how do we want to share out this information? What are ways that we want to represent it? And so I really like this quote from Dr. Jennifer Green, who says, "The analysis phase of mixed methods inquiry constitutes the heart of the investigative and interpretive process. The writing up phase constitutes the heart of the communication and presentation," right? So it is sharing a story of the results, and think about how do we share in a way that might not only provide new insights for those are who are wanting to learn more about what the data or the evaluation work that you've been doing, but how do we present it in a manner that is clear, that is compelling, and it may even challenge some traditional ways of thinking about the phenomena of interest. And so here's a place where I always like to say, are there ways in which we can utilize art to do this? How might we think about the ways in which art provides an alternative form of representing and reporting what we're doing? And so I pull on Patricia Levy, who says, why not use alternative forms or using art as a form of representation? And Levy offers a number of reasons for why to do this. One reason being it's another way of building knowledge, a new way of seeing the information that is being presented. Um, Sometimes for people, it resonates differently, or there's something about what you're reporting that is a new way of thinking about it through maybe a visual or through drama as opposed to a written report. And so how do we provide that? Two, another reason for thinking about alternative forms of representation, such as art, is ways of reaching the broader audience, ways of disrupting and stimulating change and transformation. Also thinking about how can we use this to foster reflexivity and empathy, especially if we are working in communities where for so long their voices and perspectives have not been ones who have been placed at the forefront or at the center. Might using art, using dance, film, drama help do that and help those who are partnering with these communities think more about their roles and the way in which they engage them. Also think about the ways in which an alternative form might promote dialogue, and might also provide greater avenues for participation in the work. And so I just want to highlight from Patricia Levy a few examples of ways in which this can be done, and then also share an example video. So one alternative form might be thinking about the use of narrative. How can we tell stories? Narrative often is an extension of ethnography, oral history, qualitative interviewing, and that through narrative, we can present compelling data. We can present compelling data that may have multiple dimensions or layers, may also have various voices and perspectives that we want to use within that narrative. Also thinking about with narrative, are there ways in which we are promoting compassion or empathy or self-reflection, right? So if we share a story, then maybe at the end, it is providing an opportunity to have some time for reflection with those that we are reporting back our findings to. And so what is the story, and are there ways in which we can tell it through narrative? I'll give an example that in my mixed methods class, I do have them when they work on a mixed methods study, they do have to present it in an alternative form. And so in the fall semester, I had a student whose work was on the experiences of student athletes, and this student created a children's book around the experiences of student athletes. And so that was just another way to share the experience of student athletes, but maybe target it to a younger audience, an age group. Another way of maybe reporting our findings might be through drama and film, right? So often we know that film is an opportunity to capture our audience, to draw them in, to provide imagery and narrative with it. And so might we be able to take portions of our report and create drama or film. Or maybe there is a film out there that speaks to some of your report findings, and there's an opportunity to have a meeting with those that you're working with to share part of the film and connect it to your report findings. Of course, always when we are using drama and film, it is being cautious about the ways in which we represent the work that is happening. Because as we know, there is this idea of the crisis of misrepresentation. And so if we are using drama and film, and if it is coming directly from the community, maybe it is having them look at the drama and film first to provide feedback on the ways in which that film is representing them. I want to highlight the work of Dr. Kendall Moore at the University of Rhode Island, who often does documentaries with communities around issues of environmental justice work. And so one of the ways in which she reports what is happening and how she gathers our data is through film and documentaries. Of, and yes, I saw someone come off mute. Um, Another way of reporting and thinking about our reporting is how might we use pictures? Are there ways in which pictures can also help bring about different emotions, but also convey a message? And so it might be if you are doing a study where you have community members or participants engaging in photo voice, using their pictures as a part of your reporting. If you are someone who likes to create infographics, what are ways in which you can create an infographic to tell the story, right? Which takes away maybe some of the words that we often use. And so this is just an image from a report that we produced around an NSF-funded project where we did have students do photo voice. And so then we use some of their pictures in our reporting about what their experiences were like with this particular NSF program. And so sometimes people will ask, where can I get photos if maybe I don't have photos or, communities and participants didn't take photos. There are numerous websites out there that allow for the use of photos. So for instance, Unsplashed is one of those that can be used with throughout our reporting. Whenever I use places like Unsplashed, I still like to credit the author or the photographer of that picture, but that is one site where pictures are readily available. Another that is often maybe something we don't think about is the use of dance and movement and how we might report our findings, right? So dance and movement can be the most abstract, but it can combine multiple forms of art. So if you have dance and movement, maybe with narrative, it may also incorporate music or song that is happening with the dance to tell the story or to report findings about what you have learned in a mixed method study. And so here I want to show another short video of an example of, this was a PhD student who moved their dissertation into a dance. And many of you may not be aware there are dancing dissertation competitions. And so this is the 2019 winner of the dancing dissertation. So I'm just going to play this here for you.
Cherie, if there should be audio, we're not hearing the audio.
I suspected that might happen again. Let me just go to the YouTube very quickly. But I pulled up. Okay, so I just saw the message that there's still no audio with it, but hopefully at least visually seeing it, and I can provide a link to it where you can have the audio to just see that there is a way to take something to move it from just a written dissertation into a visual format, such as dance and movement, that can be used to share out various understandings of what happened in a particular study. And then the last example that I want to share is also thinking about the ways in which maybe you can create a skit for the work. Do I need to flip my displays?
No, we're seeing the full screen slide.
Okay. Is thinking about a skit. And so this is something that I have done actually, and it worked really well, is we did provide a written report, but then taking our written report and writing out a script where we could share with the program leaders um, like in a narrative form, talking about some of the challenges that were experienced with a particular program. But the skit allowed a way for them to engage without feeling a bit of confrontation, because sometimes there can be challenging topics that come up, but maybe through role play, through skit, it opens up an avenue for people to understand some different perspectives and then reflect upon why that might be happening. And so I also want to present this as one way of creating one way of doing a report and presenting findings with community members or also with program leaders. Also with the skit option, I've done it where program participants have written the skit themselves, and then they've asked their program leaders to act it out. And so it does take a little bit more time for this for doing skits, but I think it is a great opportunity and a great way to see or hear the number of differing perspectives around an issue, and then have people reflect upon it and respond to what they were seeing in the skit. And it may allow you to do that in an avenue that feels non-confrontational. Any questions about maybe some of these different ways of presenting? I know there's also poetry and song, which I did not mention today, but those are also really great ways of thinking about how you might report out findings. Um, whether it's you writing a poem or a song, whether it's having those that you're working with on a particular research project or having funders do that. Um, there again, I think there are ways in which using arts can really help open up some avenues for engaging and thinking about a phenomena.
Cherie, in the chat, I think we have some future dissertation dance stars. Like people were pretty excited about that. So I just want to point that out to you. A couple of people thanked you for your presentation and said it was helpful. We had an observation that some of these options seem especially useful for youth participatory evaluation.
Mhm, mhm.
And wondering if you had a link for an example of a skit. If you do, they're wondering if you could provide it. Um,
So I
and
have an example that I have used before that I don't mind sharing with those today. It will just take me a moment to pull that document itself, but I'm happy to. And we use this skit. It's been a number. It's been maybe 4 years or so, and so we did it. It was around a STEM education program, and we did it. In our reporting session, but we also did it at a conference to help other STEM education leaders think about what might be some student experiences around similar programs. So yes, I'm happy to share that. That's not a problem.
thank you.
Mhm.
There was a question wondering how you get buy-in from clients and staff to use art in reporting.
Yeah. Um, so it happens a number of ways, but it starts with like an informal conversation early on about the use of art and what the benefits are, and continuing to have those conversations as we move through. So then, one, it doesn't seem as if it's being thrown upon people when we are either at the close or ready to begin reporting out. And so that's one of the things I do. Also, if there is a project at the where let's say we're in the proposal writing stage, and I think there might be an opportunity, let's say for photo voice as a data collection method, I will also encourage us including that in the evaluation as a form of data collection so they know that it's going to be happening prior to the start of a project. Um, and so far, I haven't received a lot of pushback about using some of these different methods. There tends to be more trepidation about, wait, we're going to act out a skit, but so what does that look like? But then people get into it. Um, and so those have been my experiences so far. I am still waiting for an opportunity to use dance. I have a colleague coming in who uses dance in their work and wanting to have conversations about how they do that, especially as it relates to understanding identity with people.
Okay, and we did have a question in the Q&A section. Um, and it is, what is your process for choosing between the exploratory, explanatory, concurrent, mixed method designs for a study?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Um, Couple of things. One is, how much time do I have, right? What is my time frame for doing the work? Oftentimes, um, I need a bit more time for doing an explanatory or an exploratory because they are sequential by nature, and having to think about collecting and analyzing that data, excuse me, first to then understand how it's going to inform what I do in the second phase of the work. So what's my time? Also thinking about, who am I doing the evaluation with or the research study with? And what might be the likelihood of, let's say, an explanatory design um, of those who participated first in the quantitative portion being willing to also participate in a qualitative component, right? What's their time like? How, um, depending upon an exploratory sequential or concurrent or convergent design, who are the individuals that I would want to involve in that? And so how easy or difficult might participation be? Um, I also think about, at least for us here at the University of Illinois, what's the IRB process going to be like in making that decision? So those are some of the things that I initially am initially thinking about. And then I also think about what are my research questions asking, and how do my research questions or my evaluation questions helping to inform the design type?
Thank you. And another question from the chat, what's a common mistake that people make when doing mixed method studies?
Yeah, so I think one thing is there's an assumption that those who participated in the first component will be willing to participate in the second. And that's not always true. And so thinking about how what's going to be the time commitment, and then will they be willing to participate in both if you're needing them for both or only one? That is one common thing that I see. Another common thing that I see is just thinking well about how to, when it comes to the reporting, how am I going to talk about the meta inferences that have been learned as a result of integration?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Oh, we did have one last question come through. We'll do this one and then we'll close it out. What type of study design would you recommend if you are combining data from multiple cohorts over time?
That is a great question. I think here's my follow-up question before I give an initial answer. What is the type of data that we're working with?
She
And
said surveys and focus groups.
okay. And both have already been collected and analyzed?
It looks like it. Maybe this is
Yeah.
a complex.
Okay, so if both have already been collected and analyzed, I would probably think about a convergent design. And that's because with your exploratory or an explanatory, those tend to be, those are sequential and they build upon one another. But since you have the two already, now I think it's bringing them together in that convergent manner.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for your time, Cherie, in this great presentation. And thank you everybody for attending and participating. I went ahead and posted those links again if you want to check out our upcoming eval cafes. If you follow us on social media, we will post links to this recording. It will also be available on our website. So if you do want to reference this talk in the future, you can do that as well. So we'll make sure to share that out. And thank you so much, everybody. We hope you'll join us in the future.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.